Hi, how you doing? Our weather took a massive turn this week. We had frost once. We're expecting it again tonight. It's gotten pretty cold. We had a half an inch of rain yesterday, so it's not only cold, but it's cold and wet. It starts me thinking about ticking stuff off my list and the things that I need to get done during the month of September or that I like to get done. And I like to set goals and make sure some of those things get done. And so as I was thinking about it, I thought perhaps this might be useful information for some of you as well, particularly for those of you who are new to gardening or new to gardening in Zone 3. My name is Sharon, and I garden on a large yard in a small town in East Central Saskatchewan, Zone 3. Welcome to my Sask Garden. Last year we got lucky and we had an abnormally long and warm fall, which was really nice. It is nice to have that, and you feel a little bit pampered, to be honest. I don't think our first snow that stayed, that is, didn't melt after it fell, I don't think we got our first lasting snowfall until the third week of November, which was awesome. Usually if we have snow on the ground at Halloween, it's not going anywhere after that. It usually stays. But last year it was well into November that we were still able to do that. It was very nice. It was also very dry. So we had a half an inch of rain yesterday. Looking forward, or looking toward the long range forecast, it looks like we might have some kind of unsettled weather, which can often happen in a cooler September. We also get more rain along with that, or wet, and things just kind of stay wet and cold throughout that. The wet is okay. That's actually one of the first points to think about in September, is to make sure that you are still keeping your perennials well watered. Trees and shrubs are starting to go dormant at that time, but it is still beneficial for them to have adequate moisture going into winter. You know, trees, if they've been in, I don't water any of our trees. They've been around for a long time, and I don't water them ever. They survive drought, 3-year drought, and they survive, whatever the climate throws at them at this point. But if I had just planted a tree this year or last year, I would probably still be giving it a really good drink to go into winter. And some evergreen shrubs, you would want to do the same. You would want, just to help prevent maybe any sun scald that could happen. That's not a guarantee that it won't happen, but it just does help when everything is well hydrated. As it's going dormant, it is still well hydrated. So that's number one. Keep your stuff well watered right through till the ground freezes. Last year, it was actually difficult because we were warm and dry. We had already, by the middle of October, we have all our hoses put away and we're set for winter. That's usually our timeline, is to have everything kind of put to bed and put away for winter, and maybe with the odd thing. Last year it was a different story, and so I didn't want to pull out the hoses and start watering in November. I did kind of worry about, I just filled up some buckets at the tap, and I wandered around and I hand watered some things that I thought should be watered, and that was newly planted perennials because they were dry. And so, speaking of planting, now is still a great time to be planting trees and shrubs. September is a really good month because the soil is still warm. That frost, even if it's, a little bit of frost on the top, that frost before it gets down deep, it's going to be a long time yet. So certainly that would be the next thing on my list, is to shop the sales for any shrubs, trees, even perennials. I'm going to give a little caveat there and say that if you're planning to test some maybe zone 4 or higher plants, it might be better to try that in the spring, to plant those in the spring. And so, yeah, shop the sales, get things planted, still, do everything the way you would do. Don't fertilize at this point. They're going dormant, and so they don't need fertilizer to spur on any growth at this point. And I know we like to hang on to every last blossom for as long as we can, but some annuals for sure start getting really tired looking, and that's actually what I've got going on over here. And so I am I'm going to take all of this off because they are starting to look quite tired. They have been looking quite tired for a couple of weeks already. And I have pansies to plant in. So I have them in jumbo 6 cells. Last year, around this time, I went shopping at wherever sold plants, and I was looking for pansies because, they're a cool season annual, and I couldn't find any, and it was really quite disappointing that I couldn't find any. There was mums, and which, have some amount of cold hardiness. There was some others. There's some others, though, that are common annual that are sold at this time of year that aren't hardy at all, and it kind of makes me curious why they're sold that way. Anyways, so I got a package of seed, and I landed up with 54 nice size pansies. I started them around mid-May, perhaps, indoors under lights. I grew them there for quite a while, only because it was really hot, and pansies would start getting powdery mildew, and they just don't like the heat. And then I brought them out maybe a month or so ago. It was also still hot, but I kept them in the shade, and I cut them back at least 3 times, perhaps 4, just so that they wouldn't go into bloom. I didn't want them blooming and setting seed yet, but they look pretty good. They have nice roots. Jumbo size container. I had transplanted them into the jumbo size from regular 6 cells because they were growing so fast. I thought that they were quite slow growing, and I thought you generally have to start pansies indoors in like January or something, so I thought it would take 4 months before they would start coming into bloom, but that wasn't the case. So again, that's possibly information that is not necessarily tailored to zone 3, because maybe you start them in January if you can plant them outside in pots or in your ground or wherever in the middle of March, which of course we still have snow on the ground, October snow. Snow that fell in October is still with us in March and April and sometimes in May. So if you're going to go that route, know that you don't have to start them quite that early. They don't need 4 months to start blooming. Anyways, yeah, I thought, well, that's an easy fix. Start my own. I fertilized them from time to time and kept them watered, and they just did fine. So while I think about all the other tasks that I'd like to get done in September, this is definitely one that I wanted to get these ones cleaned up, or all the plants removed. I'm just going to basically reuse the soil in there. There's no disease or any problem with this soil, so I think it's going to be fine to reuse it. So of course, one of the main things that you should be getting done in September is, we don't have very many growing days left, and what we do have left is going to be pretty much for cool season vegetables. It's going to be pretty tough from this point on for tomatoes to ripen outside, for example. They get so cold through the night that even though it does maybe get to 20 during the day, or next week I think we have a couple of days that are forecasted to be 24, but that's going to be for about an hour in the mid-afternoon. Up until noon, it's going to be definitely under 20 degrees, maybe around 17. Like, it just doesn't warm up that fast when your nights are cooler. I also was reading a thing recently where a weather person was saying that dry soil cools off much faster. So if you haven't had rain, or your soil is dry, it's just cooling down faster. You're more prone to frost if your soil is dry as opposed to as opposed to wet. So that's another thing to look at is, making sure your soil is moist. If you're trying to grow things through for another couple weeks, these are things that you could pay attention to and perhaps have a little bit more success with staving off the frost. Tomatoes, to me, I'm going to talk about tomatoes because that's a big one for people that garden. Most everyone grows tomatoes, and they are probably one of the more tender things that are out there trying to deal with cold weather. Tomatoes, to me, take on a different flavor after they've been subjected to that kind of cold. Even if they're warmed up after, they just have a little bit of a different, not as good to me, flavor. So, mine are out there. I'm still hoping, for another week or two to try and get some of those tomatoes to blush before I pick them off and bring them in. I also have cucumber plants out there, just two, and one is actually really not very nice. So I'm not too concerned about saving that. But I think there might be a couple of cucumbers on there that can still kind of grow up a little bit more. I have squash out there, butternut squash. I think most of them, I've been checking them, most of them appear to be mature. And by that, I mean, they're not growing anymore. At this point, all they need to do is cure. And by curing, I mean, when I press my fingernail into the skin of that butternut squash, I don't want my fingernail to go in. At that point, they're cured. And they need warm temperatures and lots of airflow in order to do that. So I think I might this week prune away some of the leaves just so that they're not shaded. I won't take them off the vine yet until I absolutely have to. I do have a big piece of row cover that is helpful for covering them. What else do I have out there? I still have melon out there. And again, I'm just waiting for some of the melons. There's maybe 5 or 6 left. I have honeydew as well as cantaloupe. And I'm waiting for maybe 5 or 6 of them out there to still bloom or to still mature. This past week, I got the rest of my potted perennials, the ones that I had just bought on a sale, and some that I had started from seed back in the spring or winter sowing, actually. Anyways, I finally got those. I worked on getting those in the ground this past week. That entailed me digging up a perennial, a daylily, and that daylily had to be divided before I could replant it. So that got divided into 4 divisions. And it's best in zone 3. It's really best to get all of those things divided sooner rather than later, with some exceptions. And this is going to be probably one of the other points I have, is to wait until frost before you cut back all of your peony foliage and before you divide your peony. That's what's recommended. Those peonies benefit from keeping their foliage, I guess, as long as they can. If you have a peony plant with a great deal of foliage, it has probably regenerated itself at this point for next year's growth. I cut some of mine back, not, down right to the ground, but I trimmed some of mine just to make room for other perennials. And it is recommended to cut down that foliage in the fall, which is probably it's usually after first frost that you cut down the peony foliage. And that is to prevent it's preventative maintenance, just to make sure that fungal issues or diseases don't have a chance to take hold in there, which can happen otherwise. And the other plant that you can get going with or even wait longer is Asiatic lilies. Again, those are plants where the dying of the foliage feeds that bulb for next year. And so it's recommended there as well to wait for frost, or to wait till all that green is either limp or it's dried off, and there's nothing feeding the bulb anymore for next year's growth. I have planted lilies planted divided lily bulbs when there's frost in the ground. And if you can get a shovel in the ground, you can plant lily bulbs. That's usually what my go-to for that. And I mentioned to keep watering. And I forgot to mention that pay attention to areas that generally stay a little bit drier, like under branches of trees. Even if you've gotten rain, under branches of trees or under the eaves of houses. You know, the front of our garage where I have 3 pots there, they're pots, so of course they get watered. But you know, sometimes it'll rain and then I go and look at the pots and they are dry. And that's from the overhang from the top of the house. They're just not getting that rain. You know, if it comes with the north wind, it's hitting the north side of the garage just fine. But the south side of the garage, where those pots are, is a little bit sheltered, and they're staying dry. So if I had perennials planted there, or if you have perennials or shrubs or trees planted in those kinds of areas, they're going to be drier, even if you have been getting rain. Oh, you'll notice up here that I have hibiscus. This is a fig plant, like one of those bonsai figs. And just all of these, this is a sago palm. All of these tender house plants, I guess, I brought in before the frost hit. So they've been in here a few days. And soon I'm probably going to have to bring them into the house. If it stays any cooler at night, they're not going to like that. So I also have my spider plant in here, and there's a ponytail palm. The geraniums and begonias and things like that, they're still fine outside. But these tropical type plants, they really don't like temperatures much below 10°C or 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So it is best to start thinking about, you know, bringing those into the house for sure. I treat mine with Endol. You know, there's different kinds of treatments that you can do. You can use neem oil. There's bottles of nematodes that you can buy to sprinkle on the soil that could take care of things like fungus gnats and stuff like that. And, you know, that gets me to thinking about what other type of plants should be, or what you can start thinking about for bringing in. If you have gladiola or dahlia or canna lilies or calla lilies, what else is there? Geraniums, of course. Any of those things, if you're thinking about bringing them, or if you're thinking about keeping them for another year, they need to come in the house. A lot of people are surprised to learn that dahlias and gladiola or glads, that they aren't hardy, that they do need to be dug, dried, and then stored until next year. So I don't grow dahlias. I really can't advise much about that. I have tried to winter them half-heartedly, to be honest, because I'm just not a big dahlia fan, and so I'm really not a good person to advise on that kind of thing. I have successfully wintered the gladiola corms. I find them to be quite easy, but at the time I did have access to a good cold room. And I think that was, you know, definitely a key to wintering them. I don't have a cold room now. I have a basement that stays at about 15 degrees Celsius throughout the entire winter and summer. Actually, it's always cool in there. And so I don't grow them, and I don't plant, you know, and I wouldn't winter them if I did have some. I would treat them as annuals. So if you're thinking about keeping those over winter, start thinking about how you're going to do that. You know, have a plan in place, because it's going to come sooner than we think, that cold weather. And you know, if you have a plan in place and you know what you're going to do, it's just going to be so much easier. If you're going to, I know I'm going to overwinter geraniums, some in pots. I know that all the rest are going to go in those big paper leaf bags, and they store well at 15 degrees C. So I just use one of those big paper bags. So, you know, just start thinking about, do you need a box, you know, to house things? Where are you going to put them? And how are you going to store them? Just things like that. If you need to get a bag of vermiculite or peat moss or however you're going to store things, it's just best to kind of think about that a little bit in advance. It's still a little too early to plant tulips or daffodils or garlic, but certainly by the end of the month, you can start thinking about planting them. The tulips won't grow. The garlic may sprout a little, but that's okay if it does when you do plant it. Last year I planted my garlic at the end of September, and it came up nicely. I mean, I did have a problem with my garlic this year, but that had nothing to do with it being planted in September. And one of the main things that I like to get done, actually, I kind of do it pretty much all season, but definitely in September, is to find all the weeds that are blooming and get them pulled, because they're still going to set seed and they're going to be even more of a problem next year. So I do like to get all the weeds pulled, or at least, if nothing else, get all their seed heads off or their blooms off, because I just don't want them going to seed. And the other thing I do is I like to make sure I deadhead all the plants that I don't want reseeding. So for example, I have obedient plant that I need to take care of during the month. They're still blooming. Globe thistle is another one that really likes to reseed for me, and Heliopsis. Now that one, you have to think about it. If you really, you know, the Heliopsis seedlings are easy enough to pull out, to be honest. And the birds do like the seed heads, so you are feeding the birds if you leave them. On the other hand, they do seed out, so you know, that's a decision that you have to make. I mean, I like to feed the birds. I like to see that, and I like them to have some natural stuff too, you know, and be able to just eat normally the way they would in a natural environment. But you know, I have a lot of Heliopsis, and so I kind of have to make sure that I don't get any more. And so I do go and get all that deadheaded. You know, I thought I'd have way extra of these, but if I pack them in quite well, and they're starting to set more buds. It hasn't been that long since I trimmed them. So hopefully they still have time for a nice big bloom period and give me some nice fall color. And this fall color, you know, it's a mix of yellow and purple and maybe white blooms. I want to say maybe it was a Magellan mix. Is that a thing for pansies? I don't know. It was just a package of seed that I picked up, and I thought, well, I'll just grow my own, since the stores don't want to provide them in the fall. I think they're missing an opportunity there. Hint, hint to the stores. So my list, I don't think I actually wrote it down, because I wasn't sure if I'd remember everything, but I think I got it all. I'm just going to go over it quick here. In September, harvest all your tender vegetables, because their time is limited now. It's better to get it done sooner rather than later and risk either them freezing or flavor. if you are trying to grow things on, have your row cover or your blankets or whatever, have them at the ready, have that prepared so that you can go out there. For us, it's often at 8 or 9 o'clock at night after the wind has died down that I am able to go out and put the row cover on if it's not going to be secured well. And once the plants grow up really big, gets more difficult to actually secure that row cover. For me, get my potatoes dug. I haven't done that yet. We do have a low of 0 expected tonight, so I think I'm going to have to be covering everything there and probably get those potatoes picked tomorrow. Shop the perennial shrub and tree sales. I already did that, so I'm good. I don't need any more. And I did get them all planted. I actually had September 1st as a kind of a goal, to have everything in the ground. I did not make that. I think it was September 3rd before I finally did get everything planted. And then we had rain, so that was even better. That worked out really good for me. You can divide your lily bulbs, probably more toward the end of the month than now, but you could start now. Just if you take the foliage with them, if you do want to get that done now. Deadhead any spent blossoms to prevent reseeding, and that includes your weeds. And just make sure you get that done. And also, now would be a good time as well to check all the seed pods if you want to save seed. It's time to start saving seed as well. Keep watering if you're not getting sufficient rain, and pay attention to under branches and under eaves, because that is often a place where things do tend to dry out. One thing I didn't mention is to go through your yard, and if you're not cutting everything back, even now, remove any dead or diseased foliage. Now is a good time to do that, especially the diseased foliage. You don't want that to transfer to the ground or, come back again next year. Things like powdery mildew, for example, that will lay in the soil. So just get rid of all that, and don't compost it either. If you have powdery mildew in your cucumber vine or squash or zucchini leaves or, any of those things, just don't even think about using it in your home compost. You have to start thinking about bringing your indoor tropical plants inside for the night. They just don't like the cold. Frost or not, protected from frost or not, they just don't like the cold weather. So it's time to start doing that. And start thinking about preparing to bring in, glads, cannas, callas, geraniums, and any of those kinds of things. Wait for frost to divide your peonies, to cut down the foliage and divide your peonies and get them planted elsewhere. And it's too, like I mentioned, it's too early to plant tulips, daffodils, and garlic, but it's not too early to buy. And so if you are going to buy them now, just keep them in the coolest part of your house in the dark. I usually put them on the basement floor and with something over top, just to make sure that they're not getting any light. And, I've never had any trouble with that kind of thing. My bowls are almost done. I'm going to also leave these. I'm not going to pull them out or anything in the after frost or, as winter comes. I want to see if they will winter in these containers outside. And I'm going to see if they have any growth in the spring. Thanks very much for hanging out. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, give me a thumbs up, and maybe you could hit that share button down there. Thanks for watching. See you.